The moment Benjamin Carter walked into the restaurant and saw her sitting at the corner table, his heart dropped straight through the floor. 3 days of dodging her emails. 2 years of calling her Ms. Calloway in every meeting. And now here she was, wearing a green dress instead of a blazer, smiling at him like she had no idea their entire working relationship was about to combust in front of a plate of bread rolls. If you believe people deserve second chances, and if you believe love can find you in the most impossible places, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel before we go any further. Now let's get into it. Benjamin was 34 years old, and for the last 4 years, his whole world had been built around 2 things, his daughter, Nora, and his job at Calloway and Reed Logistics. His wife had left when Nora was barely 2, walking out one rainy Tuesday with a suitcase and a note that said she wasn't built for motherhood. Benjamin had never remarried, never even really dated. He worked hard, he came home to make grilled cheese sandwiches and watch cartoons, and he told himself that was enough. It had to be enough, because there wasn't room in his life for anything else. His best friend since college, Tobias Grant, disagreed. Tobias worked in the same building, 2 floors down from Benjamin, and for a solid year he had been begging him to let him set up a date. "You're allowed to be happy too, man," Tobias would say, almost every Friday over lunch. "Nora needs a dad who smiles sometimes." Benjamin always brushed him off, until the week his supervisor, Vanessa Calloway, gave him such a brutal performance review that he came home and snapped at Nora for spilling apple juice on the carpet. He sat on the kitchen floor afterward, holding his 6-year-old daughter while she cried, hating himself more than he had ever hated anyone. That night, when Tobias called again, Benjamin finally said yes. "My sister," Tobias had said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Her name's Renata. She's smart, she's kind, she just moved back to Ohio after living out east for a few years. You're gonna love her." Benjamin had pictured someone soft-spoken, maybe a schoolteacher, someone who wouldn't judge him if Nora's babysitter called mid-dinner. He had not, in 1,000 years, pictured the woman who had reduced his quarterly report to red ink and a 2-page memo about his lack of strategic vision. When Benjamin sat down across from her, Vanessa Calloway looked equally frozen. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. For a long moment, neither of them said a word, the restaurant noise swelling around their silence like water rising around 2 people who had just realized they were standing on the same sinking boat. "You're Tobias's friend," she finally said, setting her fork down slowly. "You're his sister," Benjamin answered, just as slowly. "Renata Calloway. I had no idea. I go by my middle name outside the office," she said, a small, humorless laugh escaping her. "Vanessa is my first name. Guess Tobias thought that detail wasn't important." Benjamin wanted to sink into the floor. This was the woman who had watched him miss a deadline last month because Nora had strep throat, and instead of understanding, had simply written, "unacceptable," in the margin of his report. This was the woman whose office door he avoided on bad days. And now he was supposed to sit here and make small talk about hobbies and favorite movies. He almost left. He had one hand on the table, ready to push back his chair and mutter some excuse about the babysitter, when Vanessa spoke again, quieter this time, almost like she was talking herself into staying too. "We don't have to make this weird," she said. "We can just be 2 people having dinner. Forget the offices for an hour." Something in her voice surprised him. It wasn't the clipped, efficient tone he heard in meetings. It sounded tired. Human. He sat back down. What followed was not the disaster either of them expected. Vanessa asked about Nora, and Benjamin found himself talking for 10 straight minutes about his daughter's obsession with dinosaurs and her refusal to eat anything green unless it was disguised as a dinosaur egg. Vanessa laughed, really laughed, in a way Benjamin had never once heard in the office. She told him about her own life, things he never would have guessed, that she'd left a 15-year relationship 2 years ago after discovering her fiancé had been unfaithful, that she'd thrown herself into work because it was the only thing that felt controllable, that she sometimes ate dinner alone at her desk at 9 at night because going home to an empty apartment felt worse. Benjamin realized, somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, that the woman terrifying him in performance reviews was carrying her own kind of loneliness, just dressed up in tailored suits and closed doors. By the end of the night, something had shifted, though either of them said it out loud. They agreed, half joking and half serious, to keep whatever this was separate from Monday morning. But Monday morning came, and Vanessa stopped by his desk with a coffee, the same order he'd mentioned offhand at dinner, and Benjamin felt something crack open in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Over the following weeks, they found reasons to talk. She started reviewing his reports with actual feedback instead of red ink judgment. He started staying a little later, not because he had to, but because their conversations by the elevator kept stretching longer. Tobias, when he found out, nearly fell out of his chair laughing, then spent a week apologizing for the mix-up before admitting he wasn't sorry at all, because he hadn't seen his sister this lit up in years. It wasn't easy. There were nights Benjamin panicked, certain that mixing his job with his heart would end in disaster, certain that no woman with a corner office and a 5-year plan would want a tired single dad and his dinosaur-obsessed daughter. There was a night, 3 months in, when Vanessa sat across from him at his kitchen table, watching him help Nora with a puzzle, and quietly admitted she'd never pictured herself wanting this kind of life, and it scared her more than any board meeting ever had. Benjamin almost pulled away right then, bracing for the exit he'd learned to expect from people. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand and said that scared didn't mean unwilling, it just meant it mattered. Nora was the one who sealed it, in the end. 6 months after that first frozen dinner, Vanessa came over on a Saturday with a box of colored pencils and sat on the living room floor for 2 hours letting Nora draw dinosaurs on her arm in marker. When Benjamin came back from the kitchen with snacks, he stopped in the doorway and just watched them, his boss and his daughter, laughing over a triceratops that looked suspiciously like a dog. He felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt since before his wife left, a quiet, steady kind of hope. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that second chances show up in the strangest disguises, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. And before we close out, I want to ask you something. Comment below and tell me, have you ever had someone walk into your life at the exact moment you least expected them, and turn out to be exactly who you needed? A year later, Benjamin stood in a small backyard decorated with string lights, watching Nora scatter flower petals down a makeshift aisle, her dinosaur print dress swishing with every proud, wobbly step. Vanessa walked toward him in the fading evening light, and Benjamin realized that the woman who once terrified him with red ink and closed doors had become the person who made his house feel like a home again. Tobias stood off to the side, grinning like he'd planned the whole thing on purpose, which, in his own chaotic way, he sort of had. Some mix-ups, Benjamin thought, watching Vanessa's eyes fill with tears as she reached him, aren't mistakes at all. Sometimes they're exactly the accident your life needed.